Hey everyone, welcome back to the new episode of the Dreamers podcast. Today I have Brendan from High Life Tech. If you want to kind of go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, awesome. Colton, first off, thanks for having me on the podcast. It's the first time I've done one since I started High Life Tech. My name is Brendan. I'm the founder of High Life Tech. I started it about 5 years ago now. And kind of how it came to fruition is I've been very fascinated with the streetwear industry and kind of been following all the various upcoming brands. I think when you look back, like everyone as a kid was a fan of Supreme and you had Menace, they're big, and there was always these big brands, and when it was always cool to see kind of the stuff they were creating outside of clothing. They would make jewelry, they'd make accessories, like Supreme makes gumball machines, and like they were like one of the pioneers of that, of kind of expanding outside of clothing. But the more I did some research, the more I realized, like, for smaller brands, if you don't have unlimited capital and crazy funding, it's extremely hard to create these products, even simple jewelry. The minimums are extremely high, 100 to 200 pieces, some thousands, and it just isn't affordable for small brands. So that's kind of how High Life Tech came to be. It's been a company that has been built on helping smaller brands create products that, like, they may have never been able to create before and manufacture. And it's actually funny because now everyone looks at us as like a really big jewelry manufacturer, but that's not how we started. We actually started making phone cases and keychains. That was what our initially we manufactured. And then as we grew, we added easy stuff like pop sockets that you can print on with a UV printer, and lanyards, which you can print on fairly easily. And then we kind of got into metal keychains, which is just cutting out metal, engraving it, and then putting enamel on it and coloring. And then, as we did that, the process for jewelry is pretty similar for many metal things because it's all steel based or silver based. We kind of dove into the jewelry side of it. And then since then, jewelry's be kind of been our staple, as well as like other metal accessories. But it's a crazy story, but it really didn't start also as jewelry, which a lot of people don't know that.
So yeah, I think bringing up like Supreme and yeah, that's one of the biggest things when I kind of started getting into streetwear and stuff was yes, they do cool coats and shirts and jackets, but they also did, the Supreme brick, the Supreme axe, the gumball machine, and I mean every time they post a new drop, I'm more interested in looking at what that is because you literally have no clue. They make every kind of product, so it's cool to see how that kind of inspired you to start that. Did you, I guess, have much background knowledge beforehand, or was it all just kind of you had that set goal of wanting to do manufacturing and then just kind of started that learning process?
Yeah, so a lot of trial and error, phone cases and stuff like that, is pretty easy to learn. It's just, you're printing on a phone case, you're just putting it on a machine and pressing it down. Keychains, you're making a metal mold and then or a mold and then you're injecting it. So a lot of trial and error, but a lot of times in the beginning, when you're a new business, a new company, you take a lot of losses, and we definitely did that. I'd say
Mhm.
definitely the first year, even with products that we had already offered for a long time, we continued to take losses because, sometimes a project just stuff doesn't come out right or it gets messed up. And like, we're not going to go on the back end and charge a customer another $200 to fix an issue or because we quoted it wrong. So there a lot of the times when we were manufacturers at the beginning, we did take a loss, a lot of trial and error, but that's kind of how we learned, and then kind of smoothened out the production process. So we knew, like, okay, this is how much it'll cost us versus like how much we thought it originally used to cost.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, a lot of it was trial and error. And then I think jewelry definitely was a lot of learning because obviously it seems simple on the forefront, but there's so many different like methods you can do, or ways you could do stuff, and then people send so many different projects with different techniques that are needed, or different clasps, or different chains, or different stone settings. So definitely it's always a learning curve, and I think that's with any manufacturer as well.
So with working with hundreds of different, kind of underground brands, whether they're bigger ones, or kind of smaller people where this is probably their first piece of jewelry, first accessory. Can you talk us or kind of walk us through the process of what it's like working with these different sized clients and kind of how that's evolved over the course of the company?
Yeah, so it's always been kind of the same process. And I think that's what one thing that makes us great is our ability to take basically, for bigger clients that are more, they have their own designers on staff or they're very experienced, they'll send us tech packs with all the details, all the Pantone colors,
Hmm.
all the files, 3D files, AI, Photoshop. But for
Hmm.
some of the smaller brands that are new to it, they don't always send us files like that. They send us honestly sketches sometimes, and we basically will digitalize that for them. So I think that's, you know, the process always starts with the design. So if we need to digitalize it, we digitalize it. If not, we just quote it. Once we quote it and it's approved, we'll make a final proper artwork for you. In some cases, for like 3D stuff like rings, we'll make STL or 3D file for you as well. It's included in the bulk cost of manufacturing. So that's kind of something unique, especially for smaller brands who, you know, if you're if you're paying if you have to get the 3D design made yourself and you're not moving as much quantity and you're only moving like 50 pieces quantity or 100, like
Hmm.
to source a designer to make stuff, like it'll cost like $200 alone. So you're already down the drain $200 and then you have to add the production costs. We kind of do that all included. And it saves people a lot of money because they don't need to go out and get a 3D file made by someone,
Hmm.
and also saves time because we just do it all in house, which is definitely, I'd say, the benefit of working with us and something that has been a value proposition for sure.
So yeah, that was going to be my next question. Was kind of what sets you apart from your competitors, and it seems that having that kind of added value and kind of helping cut out some of that overhead cost or some of that initial startup costs can help, especially working with those smaller brands where they have more limited budgets. So I think that's kind of a cool thing, and kind of helps you, or helps you know potential clients that wouldn't be able to work with these other manufacturers to still be able to work with you and get out their vision. I'm curious, since it's been 5 years, what are some of the challenges you faced in, scaling your operations, like you said, starting with phone cases and like charms, and how, any problems you faced with, getting into jewelry or, trying new product types and kind of how you've overcome them.
Yeah, so I think this year was definitely our toughest year for sure. Um, in full transparency, at since we like to work with small brands and we've been built on working with small brands, we never like to turn brands down, and not because of the financial benefit. Like it's not always about the money. Like the stuff we do, like we do it because we love to do it. Like I love to create all these cool different products and see them, see people's ideas come to life and the happiness they get and the positivity they get and the awareness they get from the industry too when they create these unique ideas. um, and in doing so though, we have some bigger clients and then we took on a lot of smaller clients. We had a pretty bad backlog happen this year, throughout the year where we honestly stopped taking orders for a long time because we were so busy on trying to fix old orders. And the main place that we had issues was casting. I think that a lot of people, they don't understand they don't understand the casting process,
Hmm.
and that's one of the most complex processes, and they don't also understand the manufacturing process. Like due to regulations, you can't do every single aspect of the process in house. So like for example, casting is done in house, but you can't do plating in house. You can't do certain other things in house. You can't do washing in house
Hmm.
of the metals because of regulations. So all that stuff, a lot of time, it's a lot of moving parts. It has to come to us, and then it has to go. to the next place to get washed or to get plated. Then it comes back to us to get enameled and polished. Sometimes we need special tools to polish it, so it's got to get polished by hand. And I think that a lot of people underestimate that. They think like it just goes down an assembly line like a car in a car factory.
Mhm.
And that's like not the case at all. There's so many moving parts. And then particularly with like casting's a high loss process. When we cast for 50 pieces, like we cast more than that because the embryos and the castings, it's done by something called hang tree casting, where they hang from these casting trees. And, when you take those trees off or the molds off, the embryos off the trees, a lot of times some have holes in them, some break. So you always have to cast extra.
Mhm.
And I think that's also what people don't understand is like, it's already a low margin business because of how many extras you have to cast versus like if we just had to cast 50, like sure it'd be in an ideal world, but that's never the case. You always have to cast at least two times. And like some projects like this year especially, which is what caused a lot of our backlog, we just, we had to cast them 3, 4, 5 times,
Mhm.
and huge loss for us,
Mhm.
but, we had to recast them, and that kinda created a huge bottleneck in our system, which was definitely the biggest issue this year, but a lot of those issues have, like, been resolved now, and we're slowly ramping back up and expanding, um, but it's definitely been a process, it's been a headache and
Mhm.
a lot of sleepless nights, but we just overcame it by just kind of getting them done as fast as we could. We obviously had to refund some people who were very unhappy, but that's all part of manufacturing. Like it's not always going to be perfect. And then when you're trying to grow, uh, and you're trying to grow at a sustainable rate. We grew unsustainably, obviously, because we took too many people. But
Mhm.
when you feel bad, kind of telling a person that you can't take on their project right now, and you know that like maybe they may not be able to make it somewhere else because the minimums are too high.
Mhm.
So that was something we came into this year for sure. And it was a big headache.
Mhm. So it's kind of cool to see or to kind of hear more about that process because yeah, like you said, I feel like a lot of people think it's kind of similar to like a T-shirt. They have their T-shirt, they print it, and then they can send it out, and it's more of a streamlined process. But it's interesting to hear how due to just regulatory factors, not even ability, you can't do everything in the same place. So it's kind of interesting to hear the different challenges that arise, and um, there's only so much you can do at different steps, and just kind of how challenging that process is. And how you said like there is in the casting it's high loss, and that's just a part of it. There's no really way to fully get around that.
Yeah, and I like to add too, like you know another part of the process which has been big for us is enamel work. Like people don't realize like enamel is a paint base, and when you have a bracelet that has enamel on it, you can only do one color at a time, so you have to place one color, and we all do it by hand. It's all done by hand. We do it by hand, so if you have a 8 color enamel bracelet or you have a bracelet that has a pendant with 5 colors, you have to do one color at a time and then let that dry and bake in the oven, and then you have to do the next color and you repeat the process 5 times. And that's just how it is because if you don't, the colors can mix and blend, and then once it dries, it's really hard to remove that versus like it's easy to touch up enamel, but once they blend colors to fix that issue, usually results in having to redo the pennant. So it's a very tedious process. And like that's another thing. Like I don't know many
Hmm.
other manufacturers that will take as many enamel colors on one bracelet that we will, or on one project. Like if you look at some of the products we've created, like with Came Up in the Drought and like the one piece bracelet we just made and like stuff like that, like the colors, there's like 8 to 10 colors. I mean, the Came Up in the Drought Wheel of Fortune buckle we made had over 14 colors on it
Hmm.
alone. So imagine having to fill each one 14 times. Like that's the difference too. Like when you work with other manufacturers, like a lot of them will be quick to just get your order out. We take a lot of pride in the quality too, and like when there's quality issues, like we're willing to fix them. Like people send it back, we'll fix it, you know, and a lot of that we do free of charge and at our own loss if something's not up to our standard or it slipped through our quality control. But I can't say that a lot of manufacturers, you know,
Mhm.
especially when you're overseas, will and you go overseas, will do that too because you know they're never gonna see you or like you know they have a million other clients, so like
Mhm.
they'll just kick you kind of to the curb or like try to be like, well, it doesn't look as bad as you think it is, but in reality, it is definitely way worse. um, but yeah, that's like a little bit more to
Mhm.
touch on that.
So yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to bring up was, I mean, just looking at your page and kind of seeing all the different products you've made. And I was even going to specifically bring up that Made in the Drought, the Wheel of Fortune belt. I mean, there's just so much like colors and like how, like, yeah, you said like 14 different colors just on that one belt buckle. And I mean, if, you know, people that don't already follow you, like go to your page and, you know, just look like there's all kinds of different colors and, you know, several different colors on the same bracelet. So it's kind of, you know, interesting to hear kind of how that process is and how it, you know, is a bigger process and how bigger manufacturers like overseas won't even really do that stuff because, you know, like you said, they don't really need to, in a sense. You know, they can kind of kick you to the curb. So it's cool to see how, or kind of hear more about that process, and how it's, you know, probably not as simple as a thing as people think. And while, you know, some stuff obviously has to happen, you know, out of house, I'm just curious, how big of a team do you have? Like when you started, was it just you, and kind of how has that evolved over time?
Yes, when we started, it was just me. And you know, now we have a team of 15 to 20 that, you know, are working on projects at all times. So we have a lot of people. We have a sales
Mm-hmm.
team. We have a couple designers on staff. And then, you know, we outsource photography, and that's another thing to touch on is like we do professional photos for a lot of brands. So like a lot of the brands, the photos you see on our page, we take those photos. We pay a photographer to
Mm-hmm.
come in and take them. Like that's a free service we offer. Like we don't charge brands for that. That's another additional savings because if you have to get some of these photos done, it's costing you 25 dollars a photo, from what we've seen, unless you like know how to
Mm-hmm.
do it yourself. But yeah, that's our team size, and it's definitely it's been growing and such, but that's where we're at now. Hopefully grow more into the future as well, but the plan is to keep growing, but right now we're keeping it a little small. We're not trying to grow too fast again as we learn as I learned my lesson last time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, you've worked with hundreds of different brands, you know, in varying sizes. But I mean, you've worked with brands like Ransom, Half Evil, you know, Drought, and tons more. What has your experience been like creating like such a wide variety of products? You know, starting with like the phone cases and stuff to now just all kinds of different, you know, belt buckles, jewelry pieces. You know, kind of what has it been like to be able to play a part in creating, you know, such a wide variety of products?
I think there's 2 parts to that, you know? I think the best part about working with all these brands and creating these varieties is the people you meet, you know? You get to meet all these brand
Mhm,
owners, you get to talk to them all the time, you get to learn their story and kinda how they came and how, they started their company and their ideas, and then, like, building onto that, like, listening to their ideas, like, every human thinks a different way, so, like,
mhm,
it's always cool to see, like, how people will create like just maybe a ring or have like a unique spin to a concept or a piece of jewelry that is like different or something we've never done before and how like you can just kind of see how their brain operates on like different levels of like
mhm,
creativity. So that's like the one of the coolest parts about it. And then honestly, the second part is always obviously the satisfaction of seeing the product you made get recognition. Even if like a lot of times we don't get, you know, tagged or recognition like that, which is fine. Like obviously you don't want to give up your manufacturer. People like to gatekeep. But and we don't get the
mhm,
recognition, which we don't mind. But it always is cool to like scroll through your social media or you know you go out in public and you see people wearing products that you have made or working with the brands that you've worked with, like that's always cool. And you know we've gotten some of our stuff featured in like Hype Beast and like on posted on Hidden and like some of these big
Mhm.
complex and some of these big pages. So that's always super cool because it's like the satisfaction of just being able to see like that you were able to create something that like went viral or like did really well and then also like helped someone
Mhm.
else grow their brand as well and like create a life for themselves.
Mhm. 'Cause yeah, I think it was really cool when I found out about you and, going and seeing, like, all how many pieces, I mean, you put out and how many of them, I remember when Drought posted the Wheel of Fortune belt or, like, I have a ton of different, like, ransom clothes, half evil clothes and, like, different things. So, like, I've been following these brands for years, and it's cool to kinda see and learn more about the process behind how these, unique products are created because I mean I have no idea how the manufacturing process works. So it's cool to see uh, to kind of hear more about it and to just I mean see just how much of a wide variety of stuff and products you can make. And I kind of wanted to talk about the role of technology. I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but what, in-house wise at least, what like software do you use to like create those 3D files? Do you have, what are some of the, maybe like the machines you have for some of these different like casting processes and stuff? Can you kind of talk about how uh, the role of technology has kind of impacted and changed the company.
Yeah, so as for the software we use, we have obviously a product management software we use. It's called Monday.
Hmm.
It's very good. But that's just for managing the workflow. Now, kind of getting to the design wise, all the 2D artwork we make for like 2D belt buckles and like enamel bracelets, that's all done via Photoshop.
Hmm.
It's just done with different layers on Photoshop and all of that. As for CAD software, we use Jewel CAD and ZBrush. They're both very good. ZBrush is very popular. If you're looking for a free version, you could use Blender. Blender is also a software
Hmm.
for developing three-dimensional objects. So that's kind of like the process behind it. And then, moving into the jewelry. So for 2D stuff, all those metals are cut with a laser cutter. So it's a sheet metal of stainless steel that's laser cut into the pennant. And then if it's just a flat 2D like silver pennant, that gets just polished if you need polished. And the polishing wheel, basically how it works is like it's kind of like I'd say a thin, long rectangular clay slab, and you place each pennant on the clay wheel, and it like sits in the clay,
Hmm.
and then you run it under the wheel with your hands, and then when the one side's polished, you flip them over, and this kind of holds it in place so it doesn't move and allows for like even polish along the surface, and that kind of is the same for polishing for 3D for some stuff, and then other 3D stuff, you need tools to polish by hand. Some stuff gets polished by hand as well to get the finishing details or to keep it kind of from losing those
Hmm.
details. As for the casting stuff, so it a lot of processes. So there's the casting furnace. So it starts by making a rubber mold called a copper mold. Sorry, a copper mold is made, and then using that copper mold, we make wax molds, and then from the wax molding, that gets all the wax molds get put in these little casting trees, which is basically like a little embryo pocket.
Hmm.
And then from there, all those embryos, what happens is you pour the steel in, and when you pour the steel in, the embryos, it fills the embryo, which is like got like an outer like kind of rockish uh, feeling,
Hmm.
and then basically the wax will melt, and the wax will melt and come out. The steel will flow in. The steel will dry and harden inside that embryo. And then it's just basically like hangs from a tree in the furnace. And when you take it out, it cools. And then once it cools, you can basically remove them off the trees. And that's like one of the hardest parts. And you have to remove them. And then it's still in that outer, like, rock like casing. You have to then crack that casing and cut it and remove the steel embryo out of it, and that's basically the process, and then from there it flows into polishing and plating. So it's definitely a lot. It's a lot.
And I mean, I know you mentioned several times about, not scaling up too fast, too quickly, and kind of especially learning that lesson over the past year or so. But is there any type of product or, maybe process that you can't do now that you'd want to do in the future, like any other type of accessory or additional product types that you're interested in creating, whether it be a year from now or several years down the line?
This year definitely watches. It's on our list, and we actually have been working on a watch with the brand, a couple watches with the brand throughout the year, and it's been a trial and error, and we're working with a local watchmaker to help us kind of learn the positioning, learn the mechanics of the band. So that'll definitely be something done soon, and that's the next kind of launch. And then as a personal thing, I want to create a Rubik's cube, metal Rubik's cube. Not sure the feasibility of that, but I saw Chrome Hearts had done it, and I thought it was
Hmm.
super cool. And then, if we could figure out ways to make more home decor pieces, I definitely kind of want to get into that. We definitely want to get into more like home decor. I mean, we had the opportunity to work with um, a brand, Liquid Lagoon, to create like a metal bookshelf for
Wow.
them and stuff like that. And we worked with Bones, and we just created a really cool coffin ashtray with two parts in it, which will be coming out soon. But yeah, more stuff like home decor, desk decor, statues. We make a lot of
Hmm.
resin ashtrays. Resin's just a form of like 3D printed plastic that's molded. We've been doing some resin necklaces, and we're doing some resin. We're doing a resin toy for Landon Lawrence right now. So kind of getting into a little bit more of that, but that's all down the line, taking it step by step, mainly working on just continuing the jewelry. But the first project I definitely want to get, we're definitely looking to grow into, in the jewelry is watches for sure.
Hmm. So yeah, I mean, that's really cool. I don't feel like I like ever see brands drop, or like streetwear brands or anything, or non watchmakers or huge companies drop watches. So I think that'd be really cool, and I can only imagine all the different designs and things that people will come up with. So I'm excited to see you know how that'll evolve. And I mean, of course, like resin toys and like desk stuff. Like I have tons of little figures and statues all around my desk. So I think everybody loves those. So it'll be cool to see those as well, and furniture and that kind of stuff. It'd be really cool. So I'm excited to see how the your product variety expands over the coming months to years. We kind of talked a little bit earlier about some of the challenges you faced when like scaling your business, but I'm curious, is there any, I don't know, one specific project, maybe maybe not a specific belt or something, but maybe your first piece of jewelry or your first type of a product or something that was just a really big challenge, and kind of talk about why and maybe how you learned from that and overcame that.
I'd think the most complex project, one of the most complex projects was the came up in the drought burner phone. I don't know why, but we tested this so many times, and so many different shapes, and like it was so difficult to get the perfect shape, and that's all sewn by hand, that piece, and there's so many panels there that had to be printed and then sewn, like embroidered on the front. So I think we must have did 8 iterations of that piece
Well,
before it finally got finished. And that was just like an insane one. And then another one that was really hard was we worked with Bella Carts on this heart ring that had a big black heart gemstone in it. And it was a simple design in theory, but with casting too, a lot of times the casting shrinks, so the measurements have to be perfect to fit the stone. And a lot of them came out uneven, and we had to redo that several times. That project was a lot of months in the making for sure, but
Mhm.
and that was definitely one of the hardest to do, I would say, and complex. And then besides that, though, not oh, and then the last one I would say is we with Death by Jewelry, we created this op I'm not really sure how they say it, o whatever, opium type style pendant where it had a
Uh-huh.
red eye, it had angel wings and a red eye, and then each it had a bunch of rings in it, and each ring spun on its own axis. So that was super hard because we had to
Uh-huh.
drill holes in each axis, make sure they lined up, and then weld the eye in the middle, make sure it was perfectly centered, and then make sure everything worked. Um, so that was a super, super difficult piece, but it's just all trial and error. And then if it's not right, you just improve on it, and then now you know when similar projects come in. That's the one benefit is like we've made so many now that like when people are like, well, I want this color or this plating color or like this mechanism, like we've probably already done a similar mechanism, which has made things a lot more easier and like less of a hassle versus if we had it and then you're like, well, can you give us references off because everything starts with a reference. So like when people send us jewelry, they're like, I want it to connect like this. Well, they're sending us a reference from the internet. But by now we've done so many pieces that like we know like, okay, like you want a hidden clasp or you want a custom clasp, like this is how it can get done,
Mhm.
or like the sizing you want for your pendants on your bracelet, the sizing of this, the length, like whatever one orders. So we've kind of got that kind of down to a science now, which has been a huge help in kind of streamlining operations and spending less time working on and trying to figure out how to solve project problems versus like just getting them done.
For the first product you mentioned, that burner phone, for those that don't know, it's a like wallet ID holder made to look like a flip phone, and it is incredibly detailed. And I mean, yeah, I can only imagining like the stitching and how difficult that would be to create. Now, for anybody watching the YouTube video version of this, I'll put a little picture here so you can see. But it's kind of interesting to see like just how difficult that process was, and how long it took. And kind of one thing I'm just curious about. I don't know if you have a rough estimate, but especially with having like a team of over 10 people, how many products would you say you're roughly working on, usually at one time?
So on a rolling basis, on a monthly rolling basis, we're usually working on um like 80 projects
Wow.
uh a month on a rolling basis. So, it's kind of like as one comes out, one or two more roll in. So,
Hmm.
but a lot of them, it's evenly divided half and half. Like a lot of it's jewelry and belts. And then, we have a few projects here and there which are more unique, like resin stuff. But between 60 and 80 projects on a rolling basis.
Wow. That's kind of crazy to think that 5 years ago you probably didn't think you'd be at that point where you're making such a large variety and amount of products each month. So it's cool to hear that you've been able to scale to that point, even if there are obviously challenges along the way. um, but I'm curious, and I mean, obviously, I don't know how much you can talk about, and I mean, you have mentioned several different things, but is there anything else, in the next coming months or later on in 2024, um, that you're excited about, or can talk about right now that you would like to?
Not any like, we don't do specific collabs. We don't really consider
Mm-hmm.
anything a collab. It's just like we're making it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just excited to see like just what gets put on her in front of us. A lot of times like I always think that it'll like it'll slow down or like the idea concepts might kind of become the same, but like every day or every week, like someone said something that's like so crazy or like so out of the park or like so
Mm-hmm.
different. And it's like, well, I've never seen this before, or like, I don't even know how you thought of it. So that's just like, that's what I'm most excited for. Cause like, especially as like more brands come, people try to start brands and like also like people have already created a lot of ideas. Like it's really going to be interesting to see the innovation that comes out of it because if you really want to stand out, like a lot of people will make enamel bracelets, but like you really want to stand out, like you want to do something different or something like that that's more eye catching. So that's just really kind of what I'm most excited for. And we already have some like really cool projects in the pipeline that we'll be showing soon. So I'm definitely excited and unique projects that are really going to be like cool eye catching
Mhm.
for the brands that are releasing them.
Say, I mean, we also talked about, kind of some of the future stuff and obviously, a little bit this year, I mean, the coming months, but where would you like to see, I mean, yourself, but also High Life Tech, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Like, do you just want to kind of keep, slowly scaling up, or do you see, a point where maybe you're like, okay, once we get to this point, then we will, maybe try to not scale as much. Where do you see yourself in 5, 10 years from now, or even further on?
I think we definitely see ourselves as the leading, jewelry and accessories manufacturer for a lot of brands. And I think that right now, and all of our clients are really streetwear and clothing brands. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many other type of avenues like we kind of want to get into, in other industries. So, kinda that's, like, kind of the long-term goal is just keep growing and see where it ends up because, we've done some work for some sporting goods stores who maybe, like, wanna do
Mm-hmm.
rubber gibbets or, like, little keychains, events for, politicians and stuff like that, like, there's always people are always giving out little accessories or trying to find little cooler accessories outside of, just your typical stickers and stuff like that, so there's definitely like, we have some airplane companies reaching out to us about
Oh
sunglasses
wow.
for them. So, like there's a lot more stuff outside of just the streetwear industry, which we're not even like tapping into. Like we're not doing outreach for because we're just so focused on what we have now. But
Mm-hmm.
eventually, when the time is right, we definitely would like to expand horizontally across different industries. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm definitely excited for when the time comes. Maybe attend some events. It always would be cool to host a pop up of creators and just have people come out who've worked with us. I enjoy, and I was at a pop up last week for Days in Blue. Like I enjoy going to pop ups and visiting brands, so I'm excited to go to some more this year. Like we went out to LA and visited Ransom. We visited Half
Oh
Evil in
wow.
Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So excited for that part too, and just like kind of creating more of a personal connection with the brands and the owners outside of just like manufacturing because that's always something that keeps it fun versus just working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's cool to hear that, while you do a lot with like streetwear brands and stuff, that, like you said, a sporting goods store or like, airplane, uh, you know, company reached out for sunglasses. And so, how, like you said, that horizontal expansion and how, there's it doesn't just have to stop at jewelry for streetwear brands. I mean, there's so much you can do, and obviously you learn something from every single product you create, regardless of who it's for, or the target demographic. So it's cool to hear that there's a huge client base, I guess, um, around these products. But I guess, kind of lastly, is there any final advice, any final thoughts that you want to say to an aspiring creative, whether they're creating want to create a brand or any sort of creative, any advice that you'd like to leave them with?
I would say, I mean, the most important thing like when you're creative is like you can't think of it as like how much money am I gonna make or how much like this product is gonna make me because the moment you put like a price tag on it, like it then just becomes only about that price tag versus what like the product is just the material outcome of like the whole process So like,
Mhm.
at the end of it, the product is just a material outcome. Like that necklace is the material outcome, but the process from like the creating, the designing, the discussion, that's like what's the most fulfilling. So like if you're in it just for creating, there's some brands that have recently come out and they're just trying to like hype on the trend of like what's going good on TikTok or like try to
Mhm.
create something or like copywriting and like obviously like some stuff people do that, and like some brands have been in the industry that have already established themselves as creating like nostalgic pieces. So I'm not saying anything against those people, but if you're just in it, what I'm trying to say is if you're just in it to like try to get rich quick and claim you're creative, like that's just not, it's just not how that it's just not going to work. It's like not going to be fulfilling. So really enjoy the process of creating and enjoy like also just enjoy the hiccups too. Like, as much as we had all these issues this year, like I look back at it, it is what it is, and just keep moving forward and like don't be don't be steered away by the big brands either. I think that there's such a people are so like, well, I'll never be able to catch X brand because they're already so big, but that's just not
Mhm.
true. Like I and like that's something like I think like just put pride in your work and just like keep growing it and eventually like if it comes it'll come, but that's definitely the best advice I could give like to any creative out there is looking to start something like, and also to just do it. Like I think like people are going to tell you like you're going to tell yourself, even I tell myself I'm like I'm going to do something this day, this day, this day, and like and then I never get to it. Like literally just do it. Like sign up that
Mhm.
business on a website, create your free trial on Shopify, get out your sketchbook. Like it's not that expensive to create something nowadays. Social media is free. TikTok's a great platform. It's free. Shopify is a great platform to start a website. It's very cheap per month. Um, so there's just so many avenues. You could use GIF if you can't afford Photoshop. Like you go on Fiverr to
Mhm.
have someone. There's YouTube. Like there's so much. Like it's just about starting and creating a committed schedule. And like the one more thing is like don't ever care what other people are gonna think of like what you are doing, or like if you're a high schooler and you start a clothing brand, or like you're in college and you start something and your friends like will laugh at you or like make fun of your designs, your clothing, like who cares? Like it's your work. Like take pride in your work, and
Mhm.
they may not like it, but other people for sure will like it. And like if you let your friends talk you down, like you'll never get anywhere. Like you have to just like let them say what they want and just do you at the end of the day.
So I think that's, I mean, great advice, especially, talk about your, love for it and not being in it for the money. Because I mean, as you've discussed, several of different, challenges and, hardships you face, not just in the past year, but over the, total 5 years. Like, if you were just doing this for the money, you probably would have stopped a long time ago because, it's definitely not a get rich quick thing. It's not, it's not worth it just for the money, but it's worth it because you love it. So I think that's, that, and of course, to do it. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. I mean, something I definitely struggle with. But yeah, just putting something out, and like your first T-shirt or whatever might not be amazing, but you're not going to make an amazing T-shirt if you don't ever make that first one. And that applies to, you know 3D modeling, graphic design, making YouTube videos, whatever it is you want to do, photography. So I think, loving it and just doing it and believing in yourself is, incredibly important. Um, and, I think it's a great note to end on. So I just wanted to say thank you once again for, taking the time to come on. It was lovely to, kind of hear more of the behind the scenes process of how some of these, unique products are created. And I really appreciate you taking the time, and hope to have you on again in the future.
Yeah, once again, Cole, thank you, and like appreciate this. It was very very fun and enjoyable, and I'm excited to see it get released and kind of share it. And a lot of people are definitely waiting to hear more about High Life Tech and what we do, and definitely excited. So I appreciate it again.
All right, and everyone that listened, thank you. I appreciate it. If you like what you saw, like the video, rate us on Spotify or whatever podcast app you may be listening to. Subscribe to the YouTube and stay tuned for more. Peace out.